Coen Echols might be the best pure guard prospect in my early 2027 NFL draft board. And the reason is not because he's a finished product. It's because he already is ahead of the developmental curve. 4-star offensive lineman out of Katy High in Texas, played tackle and center in high school, signed with LSU, then earned 7 SEC starts at left guard as a redshirt freshman. And the craziest part, 0 penalties across 637 snaps. For a first-year SEC starter, that's a rare Poise. But this evaluation has a real development question. Pass protection is functional, but 18 pressures allowed tells you the pocket leaked steadily when he was at guard. The run blocking ranked near the bottom of this interior group, and now he transferred to Texas A&M, which gives him a bigger stage. I don't want to say a bigger stage, but a different stage. And also forces him to restart in a new system. Today we're breaking down Coen Echols, my guard 1, why the age and discipline make him so interesting, and why the physicality jump in 2026 could decide everything for him. But before we get into that, make sure you hit the like button, follow, subscribe, and keep along with us as we put in this work here at Draft Yoda. Today we're breaking down offensive lineman Coen Echols. Currently sitting as my guard number 1 is an 8.69 out of 10. And it's a really interesting because you hear guard 1 and you may expect a dominant, finished, people-moving monster. And that's not exactly what Coen Echols is right now. He's more of a developmental curve evaluation. He's young. He has SEC starting experience. He has guard and center flexibility, 4-star background, 3 seasons of eligibility still available. And he already showed rare discipline in his first year. 0 penalties across 637 snaps is not normal, especially at guard, especially in the SEC, and especially for a young starter. But the profile is not complete. Drive blocking has to improve. Pass protection has to get cleaner. The pocket cannot leak as often. And Texas A&M now becomes a very important second chapter for him. Starting at Katy High in Texas. Katy High is one of those programs where offensive line toughness and high-level football are part of the expectation. And came out as a 4-star recruit, one of the top offensive linemen in Texas. 2-year starter in high school. Junior, he played tackle. Senior, he shifted inside to center. That background matters as part of this projection because it shows he has experience at tackle and center before getting into a guard in college. And that gives him some flexibility across the line. Signed with LSU in 2023. Even though he was not the loudest name in the country, the pedigree was strong. 4-star out of Texas, multiple position experience, interior protection, interior projection. It was a good developmental profile. 2025, played 13 games. Took more than 400 pass blocking snaps and over 230 running game snaps. Allowed 3 sacks and 18 pressures. Also earned 7 SEC starts at left guard as a redshirt freshman. That's important. He played in every game, but he started 7. And because this is not just a backup getting late game snaps, he's a young player that took early reps in one of the top 2 leagues in America for college football. There were leaks, there were run game struggles, there were moments where the physicality was not where it needed to be. But 0 penalties across 637 snaps for a young guy isn't something just to, shove to the side. That means there were no false snaps, no holding calls, no hands outside the frame, no illegal downfield issues. Panic penalties when he gets beaten. Echols played clean football. It tells you that he was not overwhelmed mentally. It tells you he stayed composed. It tells you that he understands the assignment and that He did not let bad reps snowball into drive killing flags. And that matters. Coaches love players who don't beat themselves. The one of the more important games, funny enough, was the Texas A&M game. It was the finest full game he had. He came across as one of the toughest defensive fronts he faced. And to have your best game against one of the toughest defenses matters quite a bit. It shows that it shows you can look like, shows what you can look like when the timing, technique, and confidence are all lined up. And ironic because it's the program he ended up joining. Texas A&M saw him up close. They saw him battle their front. They saw the poise, the athletic interior skill set, the developmental upside, and said, "Hey, you entered the transfer portal. We saw you up close. We want to see what you would look like on our team." And that matters. On one hand, it gives him a different stage and a fresh opportunity. Texas A&M gets a young interior offensive lineman with SEC starting experience, guard and center versatility, and three seasons of eligibility, and that's valuable. On the other hand, it resets some of the scheme equity. It's a new system that he's got to learn, new techniques, new teammates, new coaches, new combinations, new communication, and for linemen that matters. Chemistry is huge. You got to trust the people you're beside. You've got to be able to communicate with the people you're beside. And everybody communicates a little differently, and it's something you have to learn. But one of the first things that jumps out on the page for him is his poise. Young offensive lineman can have talent and still be chaotic. Echols was not chaotic. He played like a player who understands the game. He didn't panic. He didn't rack up flags. He stayed consistent. And for a first-year SEC starter, that's impressive. The position flexibility also is a nice piece for him. He played tackle and center in high school, played guard in college, and has tape of him at every single position now on an offensive line. That's huge for his future. Some may like him as a center. Some may like him as a guard. I've heard one or two that said he could potentially play right tackle in the next level. I don't see him there. I see him more as a pure guard. That's personally where I project him to, as a pure guard. He is young, 19-year-old, and he's ahead of the curve compared to other 19-year-old offensive linemen. And I think that plays a big background into, who he is and why he is so high and why I have him as my guard number one. I don't think he can play tackle. I think he's better as a guard than a center, and that's why I have him strictly at guard. But there are things he needs to improve first. First one being drive blocking. It's the biggest issue. Drive blocking ranked near the bottom of the interior group, and that matters because the guard is a physical position. You have to move people. You have to create displacement. You have to generate force in the run game. You have to win double teams. And you have to dent the defensive front. Right now, that's not his strength. He can position, he can survive, he can function, but the run game power is not where it needs to be. If he wants to stay guard one, he has to change that. The Oklahoma tape is a prime example. It showed what happens when he stalls at contact. And he was doing it. It also showed what happened when he goes against some of the best defensive tackles in college football. One-on-one reps against a player I've already, listed in David Stone. He's my defensive tackle number one. I got to see you go against him one-on-one, mano-a-mano. And David owned you quite a bit. I'm not saying that, that's horrible, but it is showing that, it's showing some of the issues and the flaws in your game currently. You make contact, but the defender does not go anywhere. You know, you don't finish there's certain times you didn't finish a block and allowed, players to do things with you. It doesn't mean you're a bad blocker. It doesn't mean you're not, able to develop. You're able to develop more force, more lower body power, get better leverage and better finishing. But it showed me against a guy that I hold very highly and show me where you currently sit. The pressure total is something that I want to discuss because it is another issue. 18 pressures allowed is not good. Let's just start there. 18 pressures is not good. Pass protection was respectable for a young starter, and I want to make sure that I point that out. He is very respectable as a young SEC starter, but it wasn't dominant. 18 pressures isn't dominant. There are moments where interior rushers got movement. There are times where nothing catastrophic happened, but the quarterback still felt the pressure. And that matters because NFL guards have to take the depth of the pocket and keep it clean. You can't get walked back. You can't lose late. You can't, allow steady leverage. Echols has a foundation. He needs to reduce the leak rate, and that's a major goal for him in 2026. Texas A&M is a good opportunity, but it's also a reset. New scheme, new calls, new line coach, new teammates, new collaborations, new expectations. And for an offensive lineman, that's not automatic. The position depends on chemistry. You have to know the center, where the center sets. You have to know how he calls his plays. You have to know the terminology he uses. You have to understand what he means when he's telling you certain things, and it to allow you to play this game and to play it cleanly. And that's not an issue with him, but it's an issue with him moving schools. Is you got to learn all this stuff. If you learn it, wonderful. It shows an adaptability. If you don't learn it quickly, that can show as a red flag. Another concern is the physicality. It's really the umbrella for the whole run game issue. Echols needs to play with more strength, more drive, more finish, more power through contact. The good news is he has one of the more, coachable defects of an offensive lineman. You can add strength, you can improve leverage, you can improve hand placement, you can build better strike timing, you can learn how to unlock your hips, and you can still, learn all these things. And that's why I'm high on him. The things you can't learn, he already has. The things that he can learn are what he needs to work on, and he is still young. That's why I have him so high. SEC starts don't come easily. And if you're a redshirt freshman and you get SEC starts or Big Ten starts for that matter, I'm going to treat it differently because it shows something that men that I think are very much smarter than me when it comes to football, college, SEC and Big Ten coaches, I think are very smart guys. And if you were able to impress one enough to become a starter at a true freshman or a redshirt freshman age, then I don't want to say I completely will buy it in, but I will take that into account. There are very smart men that said, this guy right here, he's going to be doing some things. And I listen. 2026 checklist is pretty clear for me. Keep the penalties near 0. It's your best trait on your profile. Don't lose it. Add physicality, improve the drive blocking, move people in the run game, reduce the pressure total, show more anchor, and show that you can handle the SEC a little bit better. Prove that the position flexibility is real. If you can play a little bit of here and a little bit of there, that would help, But when you're given the reps, you have to show that you can dominate them. If Texas A&M gives you guard reps, dominate. If they give you center reps, show command, show a poise, and show that you can keep the line together. If you can prove that you can stay clean, physical, and multi-positional as an interior offensive lineman, the ranking can move quickly for you. I think you are a guard. I personally believe that's where you will land up in the NFL. But multi-positional players climb because coaches like having that chess piece. I can carry one guy instead of two, as a backup while he learns certain things. And that matters quite a bit. Currently sitting at an 8.69 out of 10, making him my guard number 1, 82 overall prospect. He's young, versatile, interior offensive lineman with SEC starting experience, rare penalty discipline, functional pass protection, 4-star pedigree, and a real guard or center projection. Currently, personally, I believe he leans more guard, but he has center projection as well, and that can't be denied. There's some things he needs to clean up. 18 pressures allowed is not great. You have to improve the run blocking tape, but your biggest selling point across 637 snaps, you didn't commit a single penalty. And that's something you can hang your hat on. But that's how I view him. That's where he sits on my board. What do you think about Coen Echols? Is he the best guard prospect in college football right now? Can Texas A&M unlock the physicality in this game? How much should you value young SEC starters who don't give up penalties across 637 snaps? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like these player evaluations, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and follow along for more. We're on our way to 100 prospects before college football kicks off. As always, I am Draft Yoda Bill Workman, your favorite draft nerd's favorite draft nerd, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.